A young nanny with a dark past, a millionaire consumed by guilt, and a child who lost her mother. She was the perfect nanny for Christmas, until the millionaire saw her in the bedroom and, amid secrets that could destroy everything, Claire tries to rebuild her life. But what she finds at the Cole mansion is far more than just a job. An unexpected connection, family intrigues, and the chance for a love she thought impossible. When the past comes knocking and a child goes missing on Christmas Eve, everything they know will be put to the test. Can love and redemption prevail? Let's dive into today's story. The snow layered thick on the path leading to the Cole mansion, and Claire Evans adjusted her scarf around her neck, feeling the weight of the moment. The town felt quieter than usual, as though all life was hibernating under the winter cold. The mansion stood tall, its gray stone walls and high windows giving it an air of mystery, the kind of place that seemed to hold too many untold stories. Claire tightened her grip on her bag, holding back a sigh. This was more than just a job. It was a chance to start over. Since fleeing her old life, every step felt like a struggle to find stability. The letter offering her the position as Emily Cole's nanny had been an unexpected blessing but carried a burden. She knew she'd have to keep her own secrets deeply buried. At the door, she was greeted by the housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Willow, who scrutinized her every move with a cold gaze. "Miss Evans, I expect you to be punctual and discreet. Mr. Cole doesn't tolerate mistakes," Willow said, leading her inside. The entry hall was grand, adorned with Christmas garlands and twinkling lights, but the atmosphere lacked warmth. It felt cold, as though the mansion mirrored its owner's solitude. Claire had only heard of Nathaniel Cole by reputation. A millionaire businessman, widowed, and known for his distant demeanor since his wife's death 2 years ago. Upstairs, Claire was introduced to young Emily. The girl, with golden hair and curious eyes, sat in the corner of her room clutching a teddy bear. "Hi, Emily," Claire said, crouching to the girl's level. "I'm Claire. I'll be taking care of you for a while." Emily studied her for a few seconds before softly asking, "Do you like stories?" Claire smiled. "I love stories. Do you want to tell me one?" Emily's face lit up for the first time, and Claire felt an instant connection with the child. There was a sadness in Emily's eyes that reminded Claire of herself at a younger age. Later that night, when the household seemed to settle, Claire went downstairs for a glass of water and accidentally encountered Nathaniel for the first time. He stood in the library, facing the roaring fireplace with a glass of whiskey in hand. Tall, with sharp features and a rigid posture, Nate looked as cold as the air outside. "Miss Evans," he said without turning around, "I trust you understand your role here is solely to care for Emily. I don't want any trouble." "Understood, sir," Claire replied, a shiver running down her spine. He glanced at her briefly, his gray eyes scrutinizing her with suspicion. "Good night," he said before turning and disappearing down the hallway. Claire returned to her room with a mix of unease and curiosity. There was something in Nathaniel's eyes that revealed more than just coldness. There was pain. She knew this job wouldn't be easy, but she hadn't anticipated how deeply her connection with this family would change not only her life but also her heart. Claire's first days at the Cole mansion were marked by an odd blend of silence and tension. Her relationship with Emily was the only thing that brought her any relief. The girl, though shy, was beginning to show trust in her new nanny. They spent hours together in the playroom, reading stories or putting together puzzles. "My mommy used to read this to me," Emily said, handing Claire a worn-out book. Claire took the book carefully, noticing that every object in the mansion seemed to carry memories of Nate's late wife. But outside Emily's innocent world, Claire faced constant challenges. Nathaniel, or Nate, as she had begun calling him in her thoughts, was an almost ghostly presence. He spent most of his time locked in his office or the library, emerging only for brief meals or business meetings. When they passed each other in the hallway, his greetings were curt, and he never looked her directly in the eyes. On a particularly cold morning, Claire decided to take Emily outside to play in the snow. She bundled the girl up in a thick coat and boots, and together they built a small snowman in the garden. Emily's laughter echoed across the property, surprising the house staff. From one of the office windows, Nate watched the scene with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. It was the first time since his wife's death that he had seen his daughter appear genuinely happy. Later that day, during dinner, Nate commented casually, "Emily seems to like you." Claire, surprised by his attempt at conversation, replied with a polite smile, "She's a wonderful girl." Nate nodded, but before the silence could stretch on, Jenna Parker, the late wife's sister, entered the room. Jenna frequently visited the mansion under the guise of helping the family, but her presence always seemed laden with hidden intentions. "Oh, Claire," Jenna said with a tone that bordered on venomous. "It seems Emily is quite taken with you. But have you worked with families like this before?" Claire noticed the probing look but kept her composure. "I've cared for children before, yes. Something I love doing." Jenna smiled, but there was something in that smile that made it clear she didn't trust Claire. Later, in the hallway, Jenna intercepted her. "Don't think you can just waltz in here and become part of the family. Nate is vulnerable, and Emily is still grieving her mother. I hope you know your place." Claire's heart raced. It wasn't the first time she had faced someone trying to intimidate her, but there was something about Jenna that made her feel particularly uneasy. That night, as she prepared for bed, Claire heard footsteps in the hallway. When she opened the door, she came face to face with Nate, who seemed surprised to find her still awake. "I need a weekly report on Emily," he said, as if trying to justify his presence. "Mrs. Willow must have forgotten to mention it." "Of course, sir. I can prepare it tomorrow." "Good. Good night, Claire." As he walked away, Claire noticed something she hadn't seen before. There was a weariness in Nate that seemed deeper than grief. It was as if he were carrying the weight of something no one else knew about. As she turned off the bedroom light, Claire felt that, somehow, this job was about to change drastically, and that the Cole mansion held secrets she wasn't yet ready to uncover. If you're reading this far, let's play a game. Type "garden" in the comments. Only those who made it here will understand. Let's continue. Weeks passed, and Claire gradually adapted to the routine at the Cole mansion. Emily had become more open, and the bond between them was undeniable. Claire read bedtime stories, helped Emily decorate her room for Christmas, and sometimes discreetly wiped away tears when the little girl spoke about her mother. Nathaniel, however, remained a distant figure. While his glances toward Claire had softened, he still seemed uneasy in her presence. But the walls he had built began to crack on the night Claire saw Nate in a moment of vulnerability for the first time. It was late, and Claire had just put Emily to bed. Heading downstairs to grab a book, she noticed the library door slightly ajar. The flicker of firelight danced through the hallway. Curious, she approached and saw him. Nate was sitting in a leather armchair, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. Beside him on the table was a framed photo of his wife, tilted slightly, and a glass of whiskey untouched. He looked lost in an internal battle no one else could see. Claire hesitated but stepped back, accidentally brushing against the edge of the carpet. The sound echoed through the room. Nate lifted his head, his usually cold eyes now red and swollen. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low but heavy with exhaustion. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt," Claire stammered, embarrassed. Nate was silent for a moment, then shook his head. "It doesn't matter. You're not the only one who gets lost in thought around here." Claire felt a wave of empathy for him, but before she could respond, Nate stood, carefully placing the photo back in its spot. "Good night, Claire." With that, he left the room, leaving her alone with the warmth of the fire and the cold of his solitude. The true impact of that night came days later, in a moment Claire would never forget. Emily had fallen ill, not seriously, just a mild fever, but it left her bedridden for 2 days. Claire devoted herself entirely to caring for the little girl, spending most of her time in the private wing of the Cole family. While organizing medicine and toys in Emily's room, Claire unknowingly dropped a piece of paper from her bag. Later, when she returned to the room, she found Nate holding the paper, his expression dark. It was an old, faded newspaper clipping with the headline, "Woman accused of negligence in domestic tragedy." Claire felt the ground fall out from under her feet. "What is this?" Nate asked, his voice icy. "It's not what you think." She tried to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. "Then explain. Now." Claire swallowed hard, her entire body trembling. "It was an accident. Something that haunts me every single day. I was caring for another child. But I wasn't there when it happened. The fire..." Her voice broke, tears streaming down her face. "I lost everything." Nate stood in silence, processing her words. "And you thought you could come here and start over? That you could care for my daughter while carrying this? I would never hurt Emily." Claire cried, desperate. "It's not about what you would do, Claire. It's about what has already happened." They stood in silence for a moment, and Claire felt the wall that had begun to crumble between them rebuild itself, stronger than ever. As if the situation couldn't get worse, Jenna seized the opportunity to escalate things further. When she discovered the clipping, mentioned by Nate during a frustrated outburst, she wasted no time confronting Claire directly. "I knew there was something off about you," Jenna said, approaching Claire with a venomous smile. "Nate might be foolish enough to hesitate, but I'm not. I'll see to it that you're gone." Already shaken by her confrontation with Nate, Claire barely had the strength to respond. "I only want to care for Emily. Don't play the saint. People like you only bring tragedy." In the days that followed, Claire avoided Nate as much as possible, spending all her time with Emily. The little girl seemed to sense the tension but didn't understand what was happening. "Are you leaving?" Emily asked one night, her eyes glistening with tears. Claire's heart broke. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, you are very special to me." As the snow fell outside and Christmas approached, Claire knew her time at the mansion was hanging by a thread. The past she had tried so hard to leave behind had found a way to ruin her once again. The following days at the Cole mansion were marked by an unsettling silence. Nate avoided Claire at all costs, burying himself in work and barely showing up for meals. Jenna, on the other hand, took every opportunity to imply that Claire was a threat. Her words chipped away at any chance Claire had to explain herself. Despite the tension, Claire stayed focused on Emily. She knew the only way to prove her worth was by continuing to care for the girl with all her heart. But the tension came to a head one night when Claire's past and the Cole family's buried secrets collided in an unexpected way. On the eve of Nate's company Christmas party, a man appeared at the mansion. Claire spotted him through the window, standing at the snowy entrance. His restless posture and the way he clutched his hood made Claire's heart race. When Mrs. Willow opened the door, Claire held her breath. "I'm here to see Claire Evans," the man said. It was Michael Andrews, the only link Claire still had to her old life and the only one who knew all the details of the fire that had changed her life forever. Michael was greeted by Jenna, who immediately saw an opportunity to deepen her suspicions. "Claire," Jenna called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You have a visitor." Claire descended the stairs, her heart pounding. Seeing Michael made her feel as though the ground beneath her was crumbling. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, trying to hide the panic in her voice. "We need to talk," he replied firmly. "You can't keep running from this." At that moment, Nate appeared at the top of the stairs, watching the scene unfold with sharp, probing eyes. "Claire, who is he?" Nate asked, descending slowly. Claire knew she couldn't avoid the truth. "He's someone from my past." Michael was led to the library, where Claire and Nate sat down while Jenna lingered strategically nearby, close enough to overhear. "Why are you here?" Claire asked, keeping her voice low. Michael hesitated before responding, but when he finally did, the truth landed like a blow. "Because you never should have taken this job. The fire might have been ruled an accident, but you and I both know people haven't forgotten. Has anyone recognized you yet?" "Enough," Claire interrupted, her voice filled with despair. "I didn't come here to hide. I came here to start over." Nate, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. "What is he talking about, Claire? What else are you hiding?" With tears streaming down her face, Claire took a deep breath and told the whole story. She recounted the fire that destroyed her former employer's home, while she was away for just a few minutes. The tragedy that took the life of a child under her care. The accusations of negligence, though never proven, and the public judgment that had ruined her reputation. I wasn't guilty, but I lost everything. There was no place for me in my hometown. I took this job because I thought maybe I could be useful again. After her confession, Nate stood up and left the room without a word. Jenna, triumphant, approached Claire. Do you really think he'll forgive you? This only proves you never should have come near Emily. Hours later, Claire found Nate in his office, staring at a photo of his late wife. He looked more lost than ever. Nate, I know you think I'm a risk, but Claire began hesitantly. It's not just about you, Claire, he interrupted. My wife died because of me. I was negligent. I ignored her call on the day of the accident because I was too busy with work. Claire was stunned by his confession and remained silent. Nate took a deep breath, clearly fighting back tears. I don't know if I can trust myself, let alone someone else. While Nate and Claire wrestled with their guilt, Jenna was busy plotting. She hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Claire's past, hoping to find something that would get her permanently removed from the mansion. The next day, as Claire tried to focus on caring for Emily, Jenna appeared with an envelope in hand. It seems your story is even more complicated than we thought, she said, handing the documents to Nate. Nate opened the envelope to find not only details of the fire, but also distorted accounts that painted Claire as guilty. Claire tried to explain, but Nate, consumed by his own pain, didn't know what to believe. Maybe it's best if you leave, he said, his words heavy with reluctance. Heartbroken, Claire had no choice but to start packing her things. Emily cried, begging her to stay, but Claire knew she couldn't fight the past that kept haunting her. That night, just as Claire was about to leave the mansion, an unexpected event changed everything. In despair, Emily ran away from the house and got lost in the snow-covered forest. When they discovered she wasn't in her room, everyone panicked. This is your fault, Nate shouted at Claire while Jenna watched with a satisfied expression. But Claire wasted no time arguing. Ignoring the biting cold, she rushed out the door, determined to find Emily. The snow fell heavier, making it hard to see. The icy wind stung Claire's face, but she refused to give up. When she finally found Emily, the girl was curled up under a tree, shivering. I'm here, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. Claire wrapped Emily in her coat and carried her back to the mansion, where Nate was waiting, anxious and remorseful. That moment changed everything. Claire had once again proven she would do anything for Emily. But now the question remained, would Nate have the courage to face his fears and give her a second chance? The Cole mansion was silent the next morning, but the tension was palpable. Emily slept in the room next to Claire, still recovering from the cold, while Nate paced back and forth in his office, unable to shake the images of the previous night. He knew he had made a mistake pushing Claire away, but the doubts and fears he carried clouded his judgment. In the living room, Jenna felt she finally had control of the situation. Claire's departure seemed inevitable, and Nate, vulnerable, was on the verge of succumbing to her manipulation. However, everything changed when Emily woke up and, still frail, came downstairs to confront her father. You let her leave? Emily entered the room clutching her teddy bear, her eyes still red. Daddy, where's Claire? She asked weakly. Nate avoided his daughter's gaze. Emily, she had to leave. The girl shook her head, and tears began streaming down her face. She saved me, Daddy. I ran because I thought you were sending her away because of me. The revelation was like a knife to Nate's heart. He knelt before his daughter, trying to comfort her. It's not your fault, sweetheart. But Emily shook her head again, insisting. You always do this. You push everyone away. First, Mommy was gone, and now you sent Claire away too. Jenna, listening from the kitchen, tried to intervene. Emily, darling, Claire wasn't the right person to be here. She has a complicated past. Your father is just trying to protect you. Emily looked at Jenna with a gaze far more mature than her age. She's not the wrong person. You are. Emily's words echoed through the room, leaving Jenna speechless. Nate, shaken, stood, feeling the weight of his daughter's words. Hours later, Nate found Claire in the guest room, finishing packing her things. She had decided she couldn't stay, even with Emily's pleas. "Claire, wait," Nate said, standing in the doorway, too hesitant to step inside. "We need to talk." Claire turned, her expression tired and resigned. "There's nothing left to say, Nate. You don't trust me." "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I was scared, not of you, but of myself." Claire remained silent, letting him continue. "Since my wife died, I've shut myself off. I thought I was protecting Emily, but I was just protecting myself from the pain of losing someone again. When you came here, it felt like all the walls I'd built started to crumble. I was afraid of getting close to you, and when I found out about your past, I used it as an excuse to push you away." Claire felt tears welling up in her eyes but held them back. "I never wanted to cause problems for you, Nate. All I wanted was to give Emily a chance." Nate took a step forward, his gaze steady. "You didn't cause problems. You brought something I thought I'd never have again. Hope." While Nate and Claire seemed to finally find common ground, Jenna made her last move. She tried to convince Nate to kick Claire out once and for all, presenting more evidence against her. "Nate, you can't trust her. Think of Emily's safety." But this time, Nate wasn't swayed by her manipulation. "You don't care about Emily or this family, Jenna. You only care about controlling everything." Jenna tried to argue, but Nate's decision was final. "It's best if you leave before Christmas." Humiliated, Jenna left the mansion, but not without casting one last hateful glare at Claire. On Christmas Eve, Claire still hesitated to stay at the mansion. Despite Nate and Emily's pleas, she felt her past was too heavy a burden to remain. But that evening, during dinner, Emily did something that changed everything. The little girl took an old photo of her mother and placed it next to a new picture she had taken with Claire. "Now we have two people who love us," Emily said, looking at her father. Nate glanced at Claire, his expression soft. He finally understood there was no more room for fear or doubt. "Claire, you're part of this now if you want to be." Claire's heart raced, but she also felt an indescribable relief. "I want to," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. On Christmas morning, the Cole mansion was filled with laughter and light. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again. Claire, Nate, and Emily opened presents together, like a family. Outside, the snow fell, blanketing the grounds in white. But inside, the warmth was undeniable. Claire felt, for the first time in a long time, that she had found a home, and that, despite all the struggles, love had prevailed. Let's play a game with those who only read the comments. Type escape in the comments. Only those who made it this far will understand. Now let's continue the story. Christmas at the Cole mansion was unlike any other year. For the first time since his wife's death, Nate allowed himself to truly smile. Emily ran around the living room, thrilled with her presence, while Claire watched with a newfound sense of belonging. The warmth filling the home was something she never imagined she would experience again. That afternoon, while Emily played with her new toys, Nate found Claire in the kitchen preparing hot chocolate for everyone. He stood silently for a few seconds before finally approaching her. "Claire, can we talk?" She nodded, feeling the familiar tension return to the air. Despite the words exchanged the night before, she still wasn't sure where they stood. "I know I've said this before, but I need you to know how sorry I am for doubting you," he began, looking directly into her eyes. "I was so afraid of losing Emily that I ended up pushing away the only person who's made her happy in a long time." Claire stayed silent for a moment, letting his words sink in. "It wasn't easy for me, Nate," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Everything that happened before, what people think of me, I carry that with me every day. But I've never lied about who I am or how much I care for Emily. I know that now," he said, stepping closer, "and I won't make the mistake of letting you go again." Claire's heart raced as Nate gently took her hands, as though afraid she might disappear. "Stay, Claire, not just for Emily, But for me too, tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief. I'll stay, Nate. The days following Christmas were filled with a sense of renewal. Claire decided to stay at the mansion, not as an employee but as someone who was finally part of the family. Gradually, she realized that the love she felt for Emily extended to Nate as well. Emily too seemed happier than ever. "Now we have you and Daddy," she said one night as Claire tucked her into bed. "That's the best Christmas present ever." Claire smiled, her heart warming. Over time, Nate began to heal his own wounds. He visited his wife's grave for the first time in months and, for the first time, openly shared his feelings of guilt with Claire. "I'll never forget what happened, but I think she'd want to see Emily happy again," he said, holding Claire's hand at the cemetery. Claire squeezed his hand tightly. "And you deserve to be happy too, Nate." On New Year's Eve, the Cole mansion hosted a small celebration with friends and neighbors, something Nate hadn't done since his wife's death. But this time, it felt right. When the clock struck midnight, Nate turned to Claire, and their eyes met. "Happy New Year," he said with a shy smile. "Happy New Year," she replied, just before Nate's lips met hers in a soft kiss, full of promises. 3 years later, the Cole mansion was more alive than ever. Emily ran through the snow-covered gardens with her new little brother, while Nate and Claire watched from the porch, now husband and wife. Claire's past still existed, but it was just that, the past. She had found redemption and built something she once thought impossible, a home. As the winter sun shone over the mansion, Claire felt whole. "I never thought a temporary job could lead to this," she said, smiling at Nate. "Neither did I," he replied, pulling her into an embrace. "But you were the best Christmas gift we ever received." And as Emily's and the baby's laughter echoed through the air, Claire knew she had finally found her happily ever after. The story of Claire and Nate shows us that everyone carries scars, but it's love, courage, and redemption that truly make us human. Just as they found light in the darkness, maybe there's a second chance waiting for you too. If this journey touched your heart, imagine what else we can explore together. So why not stick with us? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more stories full of emotion, twists, and heartwarming endings. Because here, every click is the start of a new adventure.